Good morning. This webinar offers closed captioning. Welcome to the City of Chicago Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection's free business education webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available at youtube.com/Chicago BACP. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. All BACP webinars are part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, which is a free program for anyone interested in starting or growing a business in Chicago. Getting your certificate is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, register for the program. 2, attend 6 webinars in 6 months. 3, graduate to get your certificate. Graduating makes you eligible to apply for WBENC's Entrepreneurial Loan Program. Note that you must already be registered for the program to get credit for attending today's webinar. For full details, visit chicago.gov/BACP certificate. Views, information, and opinions expressed during this webinar are those of the presenter and not necessarily the official policy or position of the City of Chicago or BACP. The information mentioned will be posted in the chat box. Today's webinar will be what business owners need to know before applying for WBE certification, presented by the Women's Business Development Center. Turning it over to Karen.
Thank you so much, Sherilyn. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. My name is Karen Goldner. I'm the Managing Director of Established Business Services at the Women's Business Development Center in Chicago. I'm going to be talking about the WBE certification, which stands for Women's Business Enterprise. I will also be kind of referencing other types of certification as we go along. And as Sherilyn mentioned at the end, I'm happy to take additional questions that you might have. I do want to start out by saying that the Women's Business Development Center has been around for 39 years. We are based in downtown Chicago. We have offices in 9 Midwestern states, 5 offices within Illinois, and we serve both men and women. So I just want to be really clear about that from the beginning. We serve small businesses of all kinds. So I'm going to talk about the types of certification and how to determine really kind of at a strategic level whether certification is a good fit for you, kind of the purpose and benefits of certification, and then how to get WBENC certified. And I'll tell you what WBENC means in just a minute. Oops, there we go. Let me start with this concept of supplier inclusion. So it used to be called supplier diversity. With changes in language over the last few months, there's now lots of different words, supplier inclusion, supplier enablement, supplier development. But what it really is the efforts by very large organizations, whether those are organizations such as the City of Chicago or private corporations, Fortune 1000 type companies, to have some, I'm going to use the word diversity in its supply chain. And what I mean by the word diversity in this context is simply different kinds of businesses. Small businesses, especially those businesses that are owned by women and minorities and veterans, but really all small businesses are frequently viewed by large organizations as sources of innovation in their supply chain. Sometimes corporate America specifically, when they're looking to attract and retain talent, just among their just normal employee base, many of their employees want to know that the place that they're working for is, walking the walk, is actually using the financial resources of that corporation to support everyone, not just some kinds of people. And so having a supplier inclusion program can be a way that a corporation can demonstrate to their employees that, yes, we do care about having opportunities for all of our employees, regardless of anything else. And then also, sometimes for some different kinds of corporations, they're interested in having suppliers that reflect the kinds of customers they have. So for instance, in the retail industry, generally speaking, most purchasers of retail products are women. And so having women-owned businesses or women-owned products can be viewed as a way of really having some affinity with your customers. So that's kind of the why and the what. The who is important, I think, to understand, because supplier inclusion programs are very small departments in very large organizations. So for instance, think about, a United Airlines. They have maybe 4 to 6 people in their department. They also do other things in that department besides just supplier inclusion. out of the thousands and thousands or tens of thousands, whatever, of employees. Every kind of corporation is like that. So that's important to understand, because the supplier inclusion professional is not buying your goods or services. They're a resource for their buyers in their corporation. And sometimes there's opportunities in a corporation, and frankly, sometimes there's not. If I'll just keep with United, but if they just have signed a 3-year contract for some kind of service that you sell, well, there's not an opportunity right there for you, is there? Not directly. There may be ways that you can, talk with them about providing sort of overflow or something like that. But generally speaking, they just signed the contract. So the supplier inclusion professional is going to spend more of their time focusing on other parts of their supply chain where there might be opportunities. And how do they do this? They do tons of outreach. They go to different conferences. Sometimes they'll host an event. The city of Chicago, as a purchasing organization, for instance, has outreach events. Sometimes they're project specific, sometimes they're more general throughout the year. And I'll talk a little bit more about our role perhaps in helping you engage with an organization like the city. But when you're talking about corporate America, they're typically looking for the WBENC certification, Women's Business Enterprise National Council. So that's what this is. WBENC is a national organization that makes the rules for WBE certification for corporate America. Okay. Think of it like the NFL, right? So the NFL makes the rules for professional football, and then all the different teams are owned independently, but all play under the same set of rules. And so when I talk about teams, what I mean is regional groups. They're called regional partner organizations, just referenced down here. And there's 14 of us across the country, and we each have a specific geography. If you're based in Illinois, you work with us, the Women's Business Development Center Midwest. We're the people who do the certification for you. But it is a national certification in terms of being accepted by private corporations across the country. So maybe you want to work with, I don't know, New York Life or some company that's not based here. They would accept the same certification. So you just get certified by one organization, that's us, but then it applies nationally for corporate America. So this is just a map of all of the regional partner organizations. We're here, obviously, and we're the biggest and obviously the best. Okay, so I mentioned who the Women's Business Development Center is, and at the end of this, I'm going to just put up a couple of other links about other services we offer. We're really proud to work closely with the city of Chicago, sometimes funded by the city and always in partnership with the city, to make sure that we are able to provide great services jointly to businesses in and around Chicago. So there's a lot of different types of certification, and this gets confusing. So you want to think about at the strategic level, certification is a marketing tool, okay? And like any marketing tool, whether it makes sense for your business depends on what you're selling and to whom. So if the question is, should you have an Instagram account for your business? If you're selling, children's clothing, well, then you absolutely need an Instagram account. And if you're selling enterprise software to Fortune 50 companies, then an Instagram account is a waste of time. Does that make sense? Just want to, sometimes people don't make that, do that math. Like, maybe you have a beauty parlor, salon, and you have a friend who has an engineering business, and she's just killing it with her WBE certification because she's selling to ComEd and Nicor and all of the companies like that. And she says, oh, you should get certified. It's like, well, probably not. I mean, if your market is individual people, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to get certified. Now, if you are selling retail products through the Walgreens of the world, the Targets and Myers and all of those, then it does make sense. But if you're selling just directly to consumers or customers, however you define them, or clients, if you have a therapy practice, it may not make sense to get certified except under certain weird circumstances. So, because the thing that I think is, it's good that the city is sponsoring this kind of program. We have these kind of webinars too, because when you start just Googling it, it just gets more and more confusing. So I've been talking about WBENC, the WBE. Again, this is for corporate America. If your company is minority owned, and you sell to corporate America, then you could apply for and get the MBE certification, Minority Business Enterprise. BE always means business enterprise. Then NAVOBA, if you're a US military veteran, not a family member, not my husband was a vet, not my dad was a vet, but if you're a vet, and you're the majority owner of the company, we'll talk about that, then you could apply for this VBE certification. So it is certainly possible that one person could qualify for all of these certifications, right? If you're the 70% owner, 51% owner of a company and you are a Latina woman veteran, then you could apply for all three. But this is if you're selling to corporations, private sector, okay? If you wanted to sell, for instance, to the city of Chicago, the city of Chicago has an MBE and WBE certification as well, which is confusing that these are all the same names. And generally the requirements are the same, but then there's some additional requirements. For instance, the city of Chicago wants your business to be headquartered and have most of its employees in Cook or Collier County. So if your company is headquartered in Dallas, you might be able to get WBE certified or any of these others, but you're not going to get City of Chicago certified. Cook County has a similar requirement. They also have the Veteran Business Enterprise, Service Disabled Veteran Business Enterprise, and Person with Disability Business Enterprise. As I kind of showed from the map real quickly, we serve 9 states, so we have these certifications from other places as well. But I also want to call out the state of Illinois Business Enterprise Program. They do the WBE and MBE as well, but sometimes they call it BEP. And that would be to sell to the state government of Illinois. So if you have a business and you are only selling to corporate America, the fact that you may be located in the city of Chicago, which is obviously in the state of Illinois, doesn't mean you should get certified by either of those entities. It means you should get certified through the WBENC program. But if you only want to sell to the city of Chicago, maybe you're a kind of a road construction company or something like that, so you're going to sell to the city, then you would need the city certification. There's some other DBE certifications. We could talk about all that if you have questions. But the point is that you want to think first about who are you selling to, and then think about what the certification is. So I know that, yeah, collar counties are the 6 counties or 5 counties around the touch Cook County. So like Will County, DuPage County, et cetera. Okay, so in other words, if you're down in Springfield, that doesn't count. Okay, so now let's talk about just the next level of decision making. Because I think sometimes people call me all the time. It's like, oh, I have these questions about this certification. It's like, well, we got to start at the beginning because we want to make sure that you're going down the right path, right? If you don't, as what is the Yogi Berra, if you don't know where you're going, all roads will get you there or whatever. So you want to think about these things first. So the first is your product or service targeted at corporations, mass retail, or government agencies, which is what I was talking about before. Let's say that I have a bakery and I come to you and I say, should I get my bakery certified? Well, the answer is it depends. Because let's say that my bakery is more like a kind of a neighborhood coffee shop type bakery, and I make pastries and cookies and stuff really for on-site consumption, or maybe I sell to some restaurants in the neighborhood or whatever for their desserts. And, I don't need to get certified. Now, I might put a sign up that I might say local woman owned or something like that, if I wanted to, because I am. And I might not even need to do that. I mean, to the extent that my customers care, they're just like, oh, I love shopping, stopping by for my morning coffee at Karen's coffee shop because Karen's just fabulous. And they trust that I own the company that I say that I do. And they see me there all the time. And so that's good enough, right? That's not good enough for large organizations, right? So let's just say then maybe that I make bread or food products, on a sort of industrial level, large level, that I sell into the city of Chicago's school lunch program or the CPS school lunch program. Well, then I do need to get certified, and I would need the city of Chicago certification. Or let's say that I make packaged cookies or whatever it is, products that I want to get into the Marianos and the Jewels and all of that of the world. Well, then I should get certified because then I can put the little woman-owned stamp on my cookie bags, and that can be a second way into those stores. Now, it's still really hard to get into mass retail. Don't get me wrong. But it can be an additional kind of characteristic of my product that might be a distinguishing factor that would be appealing potentially to the retailer. So see how that's, all of those companies are a bakery, but it's three very different certification paths. And then I guess the last thing I just want to make sure of is that many companies have more than one certification, right? Because maybe you sell to both Cook County and corporate America, right? Then you would need two different certifications. Okay, the next thing really has to do with capacity. And this is as much a timing question as anything. As you've been hearing me say, certification is really designed for large customers. And large customers buy lots of stuff. And they also have lots of requirements. So if I go in, back to Karen's little neighborhood bakery, maybe I run out of my, almond croissants because everybody loves them. And it's 10 o'clock in the morning. It's like, well, they're gone for the day. So the customer comes in the late morning and it's like, oh, next time I'll come in earlier and get that croissant and I'll have something else right now. That tends to not work as well with corporate America or with governments, right? It's like if you told them that there were going to be, X number of products on the shelf, then by golly, there's going to be. And if they're selling faster than normal, they need you to be able to pull in more product. So you need to be in a position to be able to do that. So typically, your very first customer is not going to be a very large organization. Now, I mean, there's some exceptions, like maybe you've worked at ComEd forever in marketing and you would take an early retirement or something and they want you to do some project work for them. Fine, that's fine. But if I've never worked for ComEd and I have this great marketing company that I just started and I go to ComEd and I say, hire me, use Karen's company. They're probably not going to because they want to know that I have the capacity to deliver, all of those things. So usually getting certified is not the first thing you do when you start your business. Now, having said that, there's not a magic time because these large contracts, large customers are slow customers, right? It takes them a long time typically to make a decision. I mean, we have one of our WBEs who does like medical health test kits. She got a contract with one of the Medicaid managed service organizations about a year. It was almost 2 years ago. It was 9 months. I mean, and like they were instantly interested. She had, yes, we're going to move forward together kind of decision within weeks, which is quite unusual. But it still took 6 months to do the onboarding. And it wasn't because she was slow. It was just because that's how long the process takes. And she didn't start shipping kits until about 9 months after the initial conversation. And that is honestly speed of light. So it's not like you're going to wait necessarily until the day, there's not a magic number is what I'm trying to say. So, but you also don't want to get certified too early because you have to renew these certifications and they come with a fee. And so if you get certified, if you apply to us for certification on day one of your business and, assuming that everything is set up and operating, and you're selling, $10,000 a year to start with, you're going to be paying us annual fees to renew for a while. And you're going to get frustrated because it's like, well, Allstate didn't want to buy from my $20,000 a year company. Darn them. It's like, yeah, they're not gonna. And so rather than growing the company and then maybe when I'm a bit larger, being able to get certified and do that, it's going to take me a while to get into Allstate, but at least I'm a little closer. So the concern that I have about people getting certified too early is that they then just get frustrated because they really are wasting their money and then they just stop. But they also have a bad taste in their mouth about certification. And then when it actually could be helpful later, they have to start all over again. So again, there's not a magic time, but don't do it as I open my bank account, then I apply for certification. That's too early. Then the next thing is just kind of a practical one, which is, are you willing to share the details of your business? We will get all in your business. You may feel like it's obvious that you're a woman-owned business, you're the only owner, whatever, but we don't know that. And so we go through a fairly rigorous process to validate all of the things. And so we will get from you your tax returns, and we will get from you your financial statements and your governing documents and your ownership documents and your resume, on the resume of any other owners. We will ask you questions like, what do you do and what does Fred do? Because Fred owns 40% of the business, whatever. And so if you're unwilling to provide those documents, you should not apply for certification, because you can't just get around it. We've had a couple people over the years. Of course, these are very, very important people. And I just want to make sure you understand just how important these people were. They certainly felt they were important. It's like, well, we won't give you our taxes, but we could have our accountant come into the office with the taxes, and then you could review them. It's like, no, that's just not how the system works. So it's the same system for everybody. So just, be aware. Now, we treat your confidential documents with a great deal of confidentiality. I mean, we respect those documents, but we still have to see them. And then the last thing is just a recognition that certification is not a magic bullet or a magic wand or anything like that. It does not guarantee anything. There has never been a buyer anywhere that I've ever been aware of who has bought something that they didn't want to buy because the company was certified. That's true in government. It's true in corporate America. It just doesn't happen. And it generally, I could say that certainly on the corporate side, if they don't feel that you're a good vendor because maybe you're too small or the price isn't right or whatever the issue is, or frankly, they're completely happy with their current vendor, which tends to be the case much of the time. It doesn't matter that you're certified either. In government contracting, especially now at the local and state level, there are sometimes goals on projects. So maybe 3% of the project should be subcontracted to a woman-owned business. So, but those are goals. And if the prime contractor can't find women-owned businesses who can deliver those needed products or services, they can sometimes go back to the city or the county, whoever it is, and say, hey, we can't find anybody. Can we get a waiver? And sometimes that happens. So I don't want anybody to think that there's some magic thing here, or I want to get me one of them women-owned contracts, because certainly on the corporate side, I've not seen that happen. And even on the government side, while there is more interest in making sure that there are women-owned companies and minority-owned companies in the supply chain in a little bit more rigorous way than there sometimes can be in corporate America, if they don't think you're a good vendor, they're not going to use you. I mean, that's just period. So sometimes people have said, well, I don't want to get certified because I don't want people to think that I'm only getting these contracts because I'm a woman. It's like, well, when that happens, you call me, because I've never seen it happen. So it is a tool in your toolkit. It can help you get in the door potentially through the supplier inclusion people that I talked about. It can help sometimes be of interest to, as a subcontractor, right? Maybe there's some large, Deloitte is doing some big project for Allstate or whoever, some very, very large, and they need some smaller pieces done. And Allstate has said to them, we really do want, innovative businesses in the supply chain, not just everything to you, Deloitte. And so then there may be an opportunity, if you're certified, to be able to be part of that. Okay. So what are the benefits of certification? I'm going to talk just really briefly first about federal. So you might have noticed on that list of certifications that when it said national, it said WBE, and then it said WOSB. That stands for Women-Owned Small Business. That is a certification that you can get as kind of an add-on to the WBENC certification that you can use if you are selling to the United States federal government. Okay, so it's not, the fact that you live in the United States is not a reason to get WOSB certified. It's if you are going to sell goods or services to the United States federal government. I will say right now there's a lot of transition happening and changes that are difficult for me to predict. And so I'm not going to talk much about the federal WOSB certification at this time. Third-party certification, which is the WBENC WBE certification, Women Business Enterprise, that I've been talking about. There's basically three sort of buckets of benefit. One is access and visibility. So you are in a database that is accessible to corporate partners. I mean, I get requests all the time from our corporate partners, or they're looking on their own in this database to find vendors of all different types throughout our region. I mean, we need an electrician, we need a marketing firm, I mean, and then sometimes they're so really specific that sometimes I have to reach out to the WBEs and say, is this something that you do? Because I'm not even sure I know what it is. You also then have that visibility. Well, I'm sorry, you have access to those supplier diversity professionals through the WBENC link database. There's you'll get their email address and stuff. But then you also can use the women-owned logo on your products if that's appropriate. I was wandering down Sheridan Road one afternoon. It's been a couple years, and there was a giant bus. It was wrapped with the one of our large WBs in Chicagoland that makes cooking oil. And it had woman owned on the back, and it was like, this is so cool. And I couldn't get my phone out fast enough to take a picture of it. So, but there are people who look for this, and it certainly, again, on the retail product side, can be really super beneficial. We do a lot of resources and capacity building, workshops, one-on-one advising, webinars, all of the things with our WBEs. And then advocacy. So there's a group called Women Impacting Public Policy. That's a kind of an advocacy group that we have a relationship with through WBENC. And so, we advocate, and not only for women-owned businesses, but for all small businesses, especially for minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, LGBT-owned businesses. But in general, small businesses overall. So we're involved in sometimes the city council hearing or, that kind of stuff, or the state, whatever. Okay. The other benefit is if you are looking to get certified by the city of Chicago, remember I talked about the different things that you would want to think about to get certified. So maybe you want to get certified both WBENC and the city of Chicago. We have an agreement, a memorandum of understanding with the city that's called outside recognition. Sometimes it's called expedited. That if you are WBENC certified, then you apply to the city and it can go a little bit faster. The city still has the same rules, but they will rely on us for some of the review and the analysis, so it can go a little bit faster. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about WBENC certification. I'm also going to say that most of these requirements, if you substitute the word minority or veteran, you'll end up with the same place, or LGBT, you'll end up with the same requirements. There's one exception. I'll tell you when we get there. So the first thing is the business has to exist. Okay. So you can't just be thinking, oh, I might form a business if I could get it certified. So let me try and get it certified first. No, the LLC or the corp or a sole proprietorship, if you aren't, has to get certified, or has to exist. You need to be in business, right? It's not just like, well, I form my LLC, but I'm still going to keep my job and I'm not going to really do anything with the LLC until next year. Well, then you can't get certified until next year. We can certify sort of a side hustle, but the hustle has to be hustling when we do it. One thing I want to talk about with sole proprietor. So as you all know, if you've been, part of the BACP program, you probably have heard this little speech, but sole proprietor is really just any human being who conducts commerce. I mean, to create an LLC, you have to create an LLC. You have to fill out some paperwork, pay a fee to the state of Illinois. Similarly with a corporation or a B Corp or anything like that. But if I just start baking cookies in my kitchen and I start selling them to my friends, I have become a sole proprietor. The problem with being a sole proprietor, first of all, is that you often don't think about that you're actually in business. But the challenge, or the thing to keep in mind really with certification, is because we're going to look at the ownership of the business. If you're the sole proprietor and we certify Karen's cookies, but then I don't know, somehow I get in front of some buyer for Walgreens and they think my cookies are the best cookies ever. They want to put them in their store, but then they start like talking to me about, and I don't have any liability protection. No, it's not going to work. So I'm going to have to create a corporation or an LLC, and then I'm going to have to get that certified. So while we do have a couple of sole proprietor WBEs, generally speaking, they're just consultants, and that's fine. It seems to work for them. I wouldn't advise people generally. I think you want to have an LLC or a corporation of some type. Certainly from the perspective of certification, you want that structure to be stable. And what I mean by stable. So let's say I've made my LLC, I've filed it with the state, I've started running my business, but I'm thinking about bringing in a business partner. I've been having these conversations with Sally or Fred or whoever they are, and maybe I'm going to bring them in. So before I get certified, I should make that happen. Or it could be that I'm having these conversations and it's not going to be for a year or two, and that's fine. Then I should get certified. But if we do have applicants who apply for certification and then 3 weeks later start changing their legal structure, and that's a mess. You just don't want to do that. Just have a stable organization and, from an ownership perspective, and then apply for certification. You can, because no one owns a nonprofit by definition, right? You cannot get WBENC certification or WOSB certification for a nonprofit. Okay, so then once we have the business is the business, we look at 3 buckets. We looked at ownership, legal control, and operational control, and independence. So the first thing is that you need to have 51% or more owned by a woman or women. I will point out that this number is 51. It is not 50.1. It is 51. You can become, mayor with 50.1% of the vote, right? That's fine, but you cannot get certified. So sometimes people make a joke that lawyers aren't good at math. And although I would not say that's universally true, I would say it's true enough. We've had companies there were 1,000 shares and the woman owned 501 because their lawyer couldn't do math. So you just want to make sure it's 51%. And the person has to be an adult, right? I mean, if a woman and her husband and her minor child, let's just say it's a daughter, each own 1/3 of the business, that's not 51% women owned. We're going to take out what the child owns and then look and see what's the deal with the woman and the husband. And if it's equal, then it's 50-50 and that doesn't count. So usually that's not a problem. We've had that occasionally, but usually it's not. The other thing is that if you own your company in some sort of way that what we would call restricted, that's a problem. Or maybe the stock certificate says the company, the 1,000 shares is owned by Karen and Fred Smith. Well, that's not 51% owned by me. Frankly, that's not even 50% owned by me because Fred and Karen own it together. And so it's not, I don't control that stock. So these are not usually the problems, but I just want you to be aware of them. Now, to apply for the WBENC WBE certification, you can either be a U.S. citizen or a permanent legal resident, so a green card, okay? If you have some other, even, some other legal status, some other kind of visa, it doesn't count. But for government certifications, you have to be a U.S. citizen. If you are a minority, if you're applying for minority business enterprise certification, whether on the government side or on the corporate side, you have to be a U.S. citizen. Okay, and then you have to have made some contribution to the company. Now, this is where things get a little bit, the philosophy changes depending on whether it's WBENC or the government. So the way that the WBENC program works is, if you happen to inherit your interest in the company because you were, you won the gene lottery, right? And ended up with a family that owned a business and they gave it to you when you hit some age or whatever it was, or you worked your way into it or whatever it is, and that's fine. On the government side, it becomes a little bit more challenging because the government wants to make sure, when I say the government, I mean like the city or the county or the state want to make sure that, it wasn't just like, this is still really Fred's company. And they just say, oh, hey, if we give some of it to Karen, then we can call it a woman-owned business or whatever. So, so that's not always a black and white requirement. Legal control. Okay, now we're back to black and white. you're going to have bylaws or an operating agreement for your company, depending on whether you're a corporation or an LLC. That document is super important. And frankly, most of the denials that we have, and we end up denying, I'd say about 10% of our applications, partly because we try and work with businesses before they apply to just make sure that their documents are going to meet the standards. Because a lot of times, nobody goes into business because they want to read their bylaws. And a lot of times these bylaws are very, very old, and the ownership has changed and all that, and nobody's actually looked at them in 15 years. That is a mistake if you're applying for certification. You need to look at your documents. You need to read them or have someone read them to you if you're confused by them. And I'll give you my scheduling link at the end. If you're interested in applying for certification, I'm happy to look over documents for purposes of certification. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not going to give you legal advice, but I'll tell you whether there's red flags or not. So just because I own 51% of the company doesn't necessarily mean that I can make all the decisions. Maybe my LLC operating agreement says that we need 2/3 of the ownership interest in order to, borrow money or something like that. Well, if the other owner is male, then women don't control the company. But if I own the company with Geraldine, she and I own 100% together, I own 51, she owns 49, and we need 2/3 majority to borrow money, then it's fine because we're both women, right? So it's not whether Karen gets her way, it's whether the women in aggregate can make the decision. So this is something that people frequently don't look at. They think it's ridiculous, but the fact of the matter is that legal documents don't matter until they matter a lot, right? So, yeah, Fred's always let me do whatever I want. I mean, and maybe that's true, I'm stipulated. But that I'm only able to do what I want because Fred goes along with it. The minute Fred disagrees with me, he can stop me if we have this, 2/3 requirement that I was talking about or whatever. So it is really important to make sure that you understand. So someone I used to work with who's a lot more skeptical about human nature than I am, I think, would say, somebody knows what these documents say. I mean, because I would say, but she doesn't really, she really doesn't pay attention. It's like, yes, that's somebody knows. And we had a situation where we had a denial. This was a company that was owned by 2 women and a man equally. And there were some supermajority requirements that gave the guy control. So we're having this, we sent out the denial. They wanted to talk. We're having this Zoom meeting. It was a company not in Illinois. And, I was telling him what was going to need to happen. And the guy finally said, so you mean I have to give up that control? Like, yes, sir. Yes, sir, you do. He understood, right? I'm not sure whether his women business partners had thought about it, but he knew exactly the kind of control that he had. And if that's what works for your business, then God bless you and go do that, but you're not going to get WBE certified. Okay. Then operational control and independence. So a woman, typically it's the owner, but in certain very large situations, it can be somebody else, holds the highest title. Okay. So there's none of this, oh, I'm the president and he's the CEO because that makes him happy. No. You have to own the business both literally, which is what we're talking about up here, but also figuratively. It's got to be your business. If you have a male vice president, that's completely fine. If you're the CEO and he's the president, as long as it's defined that the CEO is the highest title, that's fine. If you have really complex situations, we can talk about it. But the woman, the highest officer in the company with a comparable title, as defined in your legal documents, has to be a woman. Then we get into some stuff that is a little bit more situational. So the women owners don't require reliance or undue reliance on males. What does that even mean? Because, you might have male employees and you're relying on them to do their jobs, and that's completely reasonable. I mean, you can't do everything in a business and grow it. It's not possible. What we're looking at there is whether there's something particularly unique about that man, that particular man, that makes him hard to replace or maybe impossible to replace. So maybe your company is based on some kind of technology And the man is the inventor, and he's the one who understands the technology. Now, you may know everything about business, and you may know everything about your industry as a woman. But if this guy takes his toy and goes home, you don't have a business anymore. That would be undue reliance. Now, what would be an acceptable thing? Well, you're 49% male business owner or whatever, or maybe you own 100% and it's just some guy that works with you who's a salesman. He's a great salesman. You'll love him as a salesman. He does a great job. But you could replace him if you needed to, right? So that's what we would mean by reliance or over reliance. And then the last one, firm operates without undue dependence on a non-female owned company. So what does that mean? Okay, let's say that I have a construction company and that my husband owns a construction supply company, okay? And so I have my construction company buy all of our supplies from my husband's business, because why wouldn't I do that, right? Makes sense. Well, as long as we're paying for those products, it's fine, because if he decided to take his ball and go home, well, we would just go to another construction supply company to buy our stuff. Now, if he's giving me stuff, right? I mean, if I just kind of go in and sign for it and then he takes care of it in the back room and doesn't, just waives it or whatever, then that's dependence, because I certainly couldn't have that kind of deal with Home Depot. So that's it. Sometimes these things become, I mean, those are pretty obvious cases, but we look at kind of all of the issues. One of the questions that often comes up is, well, some other person makes more money than I do in the business. And then we just want to know why. So often that is because the woman owner is taking distributions, because she can when the business is profitable. Certainly during COVID, it was happening because, business owners were just trying to keep their businesses going. So we're not going to penalize you for that. Sometimes it's because the person is a salesperson and they're being paid on commission, and that you are happy as a clam for that salesperson to make as much money as they possibly could make, because that's helping your business. So that's not always a black and white answer specifically to that question about salary, but it is something that we're going to want to know and understand and kind of dive into a little bit. Okay, I'm going to just stop here for a second. Does anybody have any questions they want to put in the chat about this? Because this is sort of the money slide, so to speak. Okay, well, I'll keep going, but if somebody puts questions in the chat, Geraldine, go ahead and please call them out.
There is one question about collar counties.
Oh, yes, that is the 5 counties around Cook. So DuPage and Lake and whatever counties touch Cook. Touch Cook. So that's that. Basically Northeast Illinois.
Great. The next question, is this only state level certification?
No, so what I'm talking about is the WBENC, Women's Business Enterprise National Council certification, which, as I said, is a national certification designed for corporate America. The state of Illinois has a certification if you want to sell to the state government of Illinois. Let me go back here. So what you want to think about is that these, when it says local, municipal, state, and national, we're talking about who your customer is. So if you want to sell to the state government of Illinois, you're selling to UIC or, the prisons or whoever, right? Then you would need the state of Illinois certification. Okay. The fact that your business is located in Illinois does not have any relationship to whether you should get certified by the state of Illinois. Now, that local requirement, if that was what the question was, really has to do with the city of Chicago and Cook County. It does not have to do with WBENC. It does not have to do with the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois will certify your business no matter where you're located. And WBENC is a national certification in terms of the location of the business. So anywhere in the United States, you can get WBENC certified. It's just who does the certification would depend on where you're located. But once you're certified, again, if you're certified by us because you're in Illinois, then and you want to sell down to Publix down in Atlanta as a, whoever, Coke, whoever, pick a company that's not based around here, then it's that same certification. You don't have to get recertified by anybody else. I mean, and it's just It's the WBENC certification, and it's recognized by all of corporate America all across the country. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Next one is bartering okay with related party vendor.
That's a good question. I think it probably is something we would want to know more about. Um, and it's, and it kind of depends on what would be, so I mean, it just depends on so many things. It could be fine. It could be a problem. I guess what I would suggest to that person is, if that's a question that applies to you, at the end of this, I'm going to put my scheduling link in the chat, and you can just make an appointment and we can discuss it. Because yeah, it could be, it might be a problem. It depends on what does related party mean. I mean, so yeah, it's not a, some of these answers, or some of these issues, let me get to it. Like ownership is pretty black and white. You either own 51% or you don't, right? Highest title, you're either got the highest title or you don't. But some of these other issues become a little bit more, we want to look at the whole operation of the business and understand it better. So sorry, I can't give you a black and white answer on that. Okay.
Perfect. Last question.
Oh,
How long must we be operating before application of WBEC?
Yeah. So, there's not a magic number, as I said. I would, you first of all have to be operating. So you've got to have, some sales and some expenses and all of that, right? So at a minimum, the company has to be functioning as a company. In terms of how long, it depends on all sorts of things. Again, if I worked for ComEd and I retired from ComEd and they want to hire me back to do some marketing projects for them and they want me to get certified, well, then I should get certified now, right? But if I just decide Monday, I'm done with this whole WBDC thing and I'm going to start my own company, and then I'm going to start calling on people, I probably need to grow my business with smaller customers first, using my personal professional network first, and then getting to the point where ComEd or whoever, would find me to be what I would call a safe vendor. I mean, there's an important concept, I think, that a lot of times small businesses miss, which is that people who work in corporate America, especially people who work in procurement in corporate America, tend to be pretty risk averse, right? If they wanted to, be an entrepreneur, they'd be doing that. And you will observe that they're not. They're working a 9 to 5 in corporate America. And so a lot of what they're concerned about is not having something screw up. And so you've maybe heard the phrase, nobody's ever been fired from using IBM or by using IBM. And what they mean by that is some of these large, like an IBM company or, very large companies, I mean, they can screw things up as badly as anybody else, but they're big, they're known, they're vetted, I'm back to big, right? And so if I'm a buyer and I, execute a consulting contract with IBM or whoever, I mean, any large Deloitte, whatever, name the company, and they screw something up, that's on them, right? My I's were dotted and T's were crossed, and that's on them. But if I have a consulting contract with a 1 or 2 person operation and there's a problem, then it's really on me. It's like, Karen, what the heck were you thinking? These people are a small, new little company. What were you thinking doing that? Of course it was going to be a problem. You're an idiot. You're fired, right? That's a bad day for me. So what am I going to do, right? I'm going to go with a larger company. So you want to be big enough that you can make the compelling argument that the advantages of working with you, you're innovative, you're bringing some kind of new, anything, whatever it is that you bring to the table, is going to more than offset the fact that you're a little bit smaller or maybe a lot smaller. Okay. So if you're teeny tiny, probably wait. But it also just depends on the industry you're in. So, if you're a small electrical subcontractor, but you have all the, certifications that you need for your business in terms of quality and licenses and all of that stuff and experience, right? So maybe you've been an electrician for 20 years and now you're just going out on your own. and you are able then to work as a subcontractor on projects through general contractors or whatever that know you and that trust you, then you could get certified right away. So there's not a magic number. Okay, anything else?
No, that's all I see.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm not going to walk through every single document, but as I mentioned earlier, we're going to get in your business. So you're going to give us documents that prove that the government says you're female, like it could be a driver's license or a passport, that your citizenship or green card status is documented. So a passport, a birth certificate, whatever. We're going to look at your financial information. We're going to look at your tax returns. We're going to look at your most recent year financial statement. And we're not looking at that to audit you. And we're not looking at that to, see, well, they lost money last year. We're looking at that to make sure you're operating. That's the main thing. And we want to make sure that all of these things are consistent. Okay. We want to look at your balance sheet because that's where you list your loans. And we want to know if there's a loan. If you have a loan with, Bank ABC, probably not a problem at all. Excuse me. But if you have a loan with a male family member, we had a situation where we had these two women, and these were women in their 50s, who had purchased a very large company from their father, and they owned it 50-50, which that would be fine. But the sales agreement was just so awful. Because they were 50-50, if they came to an impasse, he got to make the decision. Now, I will tell you, if Geraldine and I just went out and bought the same company, we would never have agreed to that sort of thing, right? That the seller just gets to be the tiebreaker. No. But when it's dad, that's a little harder, right? So, we've been working with this company before they applied. And this was one thing we called out, like, you got to change this. So it was good because they were then able to use the fact that they wanted to get certified and that would be beneficial for the business to go back to dad and say, Dad, come on, go play golf, get out of the business. We're going to run the business now. And they changed his documents so that he did not have that authority anymore. So we look at all that stuff and that's, so any kind of loan documents, anything like that. We look at your list of personnel. And generally what we're just wanting to see is who's leading the team. And we want to make sure, we have a situation actually right now, and I'm going to just find out why, where the male vice president, maybe, anyway, he's an officer, makes significantly more than the woman, significant, like 10 times. And we just want to understand why, right? So we're going to ask for your list of personnel. We look at the payroll, and we just want to understand what's going on. And it could very well be that there's completely legitimate reasons, and we'll certify it. But, we just want to understand. Then information, like when we talk about like management info, we want to see your resume, and the resume of all of the owners. And I will say that probably one of the big mistakes that people make when they're applying for certification is they just kind of view this whole thing as garbage. I was going to use a different word, but this is being recorded, so I'll say garbage. And that the whole point of this exercise is that is this just an exercise? It's just box checking. Just give us, the least that you can get away with. Do not spend any time thinking about this and just do it. Often those companies get denied because they don't explain why the woman knows the business. Okay. And like we just had an appeal. So if we deny you, you can appeal. And this was a situation where this woman worked in IT, excuse me, and her nephew was in the landscaping business, and they set up a landscaping company. And excuse me, from her resume and from her job, the way she talked about things, she didn't have any experience in the industry. And it's like, okay, well, we considered that to be undue reliance on this guy, and so we denied it. Well, then she pulls out all of these, and I think they were legitimate documents, these trainings that she'd gone to about, landscaping and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, if you had just given us this 2 months ago, we would not be even having this conversation, you know? So sometimes if you're applying for a job and you have a resume and it says that you were the office manager, that might be all you need to put maybe on your resume. Probably not a good idea. Anyway, but if you've worked in this industry and you've worked your way up and now you're the president, we want to know all the things you did. And we certainly want to know all the things you do. Now, if this is a one-woman operation, it's an HR consulting company, and you've been in HR for 20 years, and you're the only person who works in the business and all that, it becomes a little bit less important because then it's like, who else are we going to worry about? But if there are other people involved in the business, we want, especially if those people are men, we want to know what is your expertise? How are you demonstrating that you have the ability to critically oversee the work of subordinates? So I gave an example earlier of me having a construction company with my husband's construction supply company. Being real, I could never get certified, and I should never get certified to own a construction company. I could start a construction company, Karen's Construction Company, and I could own 100% of it, and I could file with the Secretary of State, and I could open up a bank account, and I could maybe even find a customer. But I'm not running the business. I have to watch a YouTube video to change batteries. That is actually true. I don't know anything about it. And so even if I am the 100% owner, the only way this company is viable is if I've got somebody else who's actually the expert. And I am going to, by definition, then be entirely dependent on them. They could tell me anything and I would probably end up believing it, right? So I don't have control over that business. So that's why we're looking to make sure that that isn't the kind of thing that's happening. And then governance info, your, legal documents such as your bylaws, your operating agreement, if you have shareholder agreements or anything like that. And then we talk about additional requirements. I mean, we need to see your bank signature card. I mean, we had a situation where the woman owner wasn't on the bank account. It's like, really? Come on, lady. And it was a pretty good sized company, and she probably wasn't ever going to be signing things, but she should have been on the bank account. That was a problem. So, it's just that kind of stuff is what we're looking at. Okay, then once you apply, and you do this through an online portal, and that is true of almost all certification applications now. You pretty much all of them are online, but certainly the WBENC WBE certification is done online. It's through a portal called WBENC Link. Actually, it's the same type of portal, or the same company that the city and the county both use. They're all separated from each other in terms of, like, if you put stuff into your city certification, I can't see it, and vice versa, but it's the same computer software platform. Anyway, we let you know, we review the documents, we look at, we have an internal, a reviewer who does the review. She will reach out to you if you're missing documents or if she has questions. And then we have a committee that meets once a month that will look at the application and say, yes, this is, meets WBENC criteria, and we should certify, or no. Then we do a site visit, which is generally virtual. Under certain conditions, we do them in person. And sometimes people say, well, you saw that I had some problem on my, my bylaws right away. You knew you were going to deny it. Why did you waste my time with a site visit? Well, the reason, everybody gets the whole thing, right? It's not like, oh, maybe there's 3 reasons in your bylaws that are basis for denial. We're not going to just tell you one of them. We're going to tell you all 3. And then we do the site visit too, because it could be that the site visit shows that maybe there's a problem. Maybe with a site visitor is like, yeah, I don't think that Sally really runs this company. She wasn't able to answer these questions, and she kept looking around, and whatever, right? So if we're going to do a denial, we want to deny you for all of the reasons, and not just like one of them, even though one of them by itself would be a reason for denial, because we don't want you to go and change that one thing and then come back and apply, and then we give you another thing, right? Like whack-a-mole. So that's the reason that process exists the way it does. And then we make the final decision. This whole process takes 60 to 90 days. Generally closer to 60 if you've given us all of the documents the first time. Generally 90 or sometimes even longer if we have to fight you for the documents. I mean, I was just talking with one of our reviewers this morning, and she's got somebody who applied basically 2 months ago and still hasn't provided the documents that are needed for the application. So she's not going to be done in 90 days, but that's kind of on her. So, but if it's, and if it's it also sometimes just has to do with the timing of when the application comes in versus when the monthly committee meeting is and how fast we can get the site visit scheduled. I mean, I've actually seen files get done in 15 days, but that's by far the earliest. But I mean, that person was just ridiculously lucky. Usually I would say 45 to 70 days is typical now for a new application for us. Okay. Then the WOSB certification, that stands for Women-Owned Small Business. This is to sell to the United States federal government. So I'll say that again, this is to sell to the United States federal government. As I said earlier, it's a little bit murky to me what's going on with federal procurement right now. They're making a lot of changes. But you can still apply for WOSB certification as an add-on or in conjunction with the WBE certification. We do the WBE review first, and then if you get certified, we do the WOSB. There's some additional documents that and requirements that you have. So you have to meet the small size standards for your industry. So, I mean, we have a WBE in Minnesota that's over $1 billion, billion with a B. There's the family, it's family controlled business, and most of the members of the family are women and they run the business. So there you go. But for the WOSB, you have to meet the small size standards, which is by the Small Business Administration of the federal government. As I mentioned, the US citizen piece. Now, this is something that's a little bit different. As I mentioned, for WBENC certification, if you have a full-time job and you are running the business as kind of a side hustle, as long as we believe you are actually running the business and all of those things, the fact that it's part-time or that you maybe have another job or whatever isn't necessarily a deal killer. We want to know about what that job is and all of the things, but it's not a problem. It is a problem for the WOSB. So we have people make this argument all the time, and it's not going to fly with the SBA. You say, well, I work my day job and then I run the business at night, and that's fine. And I mean, that's how lots of businesses start, and there's no shame in that. But the SBA wants you working in the job, full-time, daytime business hours. Even honestly, even if that doesn't make sense for your business, that's the requirement. So, in that situation, then maybe you might get WBENC certified, and then when the business grows to the point where you can, be where you get another job or where you're full-time in the business, then we can add the WOSB. This, it does get back to just the general capacity of your business, though. I mean, if you are kind of doing a part-time gig job, it's unlikely that Aon is going to be interested in working with you. Where this tends to be more common is in consumer packaged goods. So maybe I'm working with a co-packer who's making my cookies that I want to sell into the Walgreens or the whatever. And I still have my day job because I'm not making any money selling cookies yet. And so that would be more the use case where WBENC certification would make sense at that point. And then if I decide in the future that maybe the government's going to buy my cookies, I mean, maybe not, whatever, then I might add the WOSB. And then basically you have to have control of the board, which is not so different than the WBE certification. Okay, there's a couple of documents that are needed that are for the WOSB. One is you have to be active on sam.gov. That is the federal government's procurement portal that all companies, I mean, Boeing has a sam.gov, entry, or probably a bunch of them. And so sam.gov is a very large database that has very few humans associated with it. And this was true. This has always been true. I mean, this is not a recent development. It's worse now, but it was bad before. So You want to be really careful with SAM.gov in terms of making sure that your address isn't exactly the same as the address that the Illinois Secretary of State has for your business. For instance, if your address is 123 West Monroe and the Secretary of State, you say W Monroe, and you type in the word West Monroe in the SAM, it can become a problem. It will, that's not a match, is it? So if a human were looking at it, they'd say, yes, same address, on to the next concern, but that's not necessarily how computers work. So you just want to be very careful with making sure that you're not mistyping things. If you type the wrong email address in, we have women all the time who have a typo in their email address. Now, how the heck are we supposed to reach out to you? But we'll eventually figure it out, and a human will look at it and you'll say, oh yeah, they, switch these two letters or whatever. Sometimes that's obvious. That is not how a computer works, right? So you want to be careful when you do these things. You want to take that extra time. Back to my point that this isn't just, I mean, if getting certified is important enough to your business to do it, it's important enough to do it right. And sloppiness just doesn't help your cause at all. And in SAM.gov, all sloppiness will do is just cause you months of a nightmare. So it's worth that extra 15 seconds. Make sure that you typed it in right. And then that's that. And then we need some kind of employee list. So maybe it's a 994 form or a W-3, or it could just be a current employee list. Okay, so you want to, first of all, this know before. This is great that you're at this program today, because that helps you kind of understand what the requirements are. First of all, does it make sense at all? And second of all, then, what do I need to be thinking about? You want to get your documents generally together first. On the WBENC application, you start your application on WBENC link. You then have 90 days to complete and submit the application. If you don't, on the 90th day, it deletes. It's a security thing. But boy, you might have spent hours on it, and then you just miss that deletion date and it's all gone and you have to start over. So, I mean, it's not a denial or anything because you haven't submitted it yet, but it's a lot of work down the tubes. So what I recommend to people is, first of all, get your documents together first. So, you know where your tax returns are and all that. Plus, that just makes it a lot less painful to do it because you could just drag and drop, as opposed to every time you come to the next requirement, you have to go away and find it and come back. But the other thing is, schedule an appointment with yourself for 2 months out. Okay. And just, 9 o'clock in the morning, finish WBENC application, whatever. And then that way, if things get away from you, you'll remember and you'll have a month to get it finished. Now, I will say this, the 90 days is a WBENC requirement. If you are applying for the city of Chicago or Cook County, those are 60 days. So you'll have to give yourself the month reminder. But I mean, we've had clients who've done, and that's happened to, and it's just awful. I can't help you. Tech support can't help you. Only you can help yourself with that. Set expectations in terms of time frame. We've kind of talked about that, and we've talked about that it's more than ownership. Here's an important thing. Know your NAICS code, North American Industrial Classification System code, NAICS. This is just a 6-digit number. Actually, you will generally be able to see it at the top of your tax return. Every type of industry has a different NAICS code, 546111, or whatever it is. Pro tip, if your NAICS code is 999999 or 000000, that is a NAICS code for you have a lazy tax preparer, because they just didn't even want to look it up. But you're going to get certified for a certain type of industry. And I guess I kind of took this for granted in what I was saying, but let me explain why, like the resume and all those things are so important. So we'll go back to Karen's construction company. I own a company 100%. Can I get certified? Well, I don't know. I mean, if it's a business consulting company, then sure, I will get certified. If it's a construction company, then no, I will not get certified because I don't understand that industry. So you don't just get certified, you get certified for a particular type of, and it can be more than one. It's not like only one, but for a particular set of NAICS codes, one or more NAICS codes. And so if I get certified as a professional services company and I'm doing that, and then somebody comes to me and says, hey, Karen, let's start doing some construction. In that same company, because you're already certified, I shouldn't be doing that. And so like for that purpose, I wouldn't even count as being certified because I'm not certified to do construction. Then the other thing is timely responses. You can help yourself by paying attention to the system. I mean, we've had people who apply for certification and then go on maternity leave. And so they're not paying any attention, understandably, to their application. And so we ask questions. We don't know you're on maternity leave. So we ask questions, we don't get any response. And after about 60 days, we just close the file and that's the end of it. You don't get your money back. I mean, we've been doing the work, right? So the application fee is to pay us to do the work, and we've been doing the work. It's just you aren't being responsive. So you want to just kind of pay attention to it. I will say that, and this is sort of a difference between the way the city has to operate, because the city is a government, and so they have to follow more rules sometimes than we do. If we send what we call a Q&A out to you, asking you a question or for an additional document or whatever, the system defaults to a week, but maybe you can't get the document in that week. Do not freak out. Just say, I'm working on it, or, my accountant's out of town, or whatever, right? And I'll get it to you. And that's completely fine. We do not shut the file down after that first week. Now, again, after a month or two, we're going to say, come on, we're done with this. But don't freak out. Now, if you're applying on the state, city, or county side, you do want to pay more attention to those deadlines. But I also will say, if you kind of indicate to us that you couldn't care less about the time frame because we don't hear from you for a month and a half, I mean, we want to get your file done, but it's not going to be the most important thing on our day if it's not the most important thing on yours. So just kind of pay attention, keep the process moving, and that makes everybody happier. Okay. So next steps, if you are interested, and I'm going to in a moment put some stuff in the chat so you can copy my scheduling link and some other things, and we can set up a time. One other thing I haven't really talked about, I've kind of talked around, is the application fee. So we have an annual application fee because you do have to renew your application or your certification every year. The renewal is much easier. You're basically just giving us updated financials and tax returns. But it lets us make sure that everything is still current, and that you still comply with the rules. Anyway, so that's every year. And the application fee is based on your revenue range for your most recent year. So like if you were applying today, it would be, what is your 2024 tax revenue say? Top line, not profit, top line. So up to $1 million, it's $350 a year. $1 million to $5 million is $500, and it goes up from there. The highest is $1,250, and that's if you're over $50 million in revenue. We do have a scholarship that will pay for half of the cost of the initial application if you are if your revenue is under $500,000. So, but make an appointment with me, we can talk all that stuff through. And then I mentioned the recertification process. We do a site visit every 3 years. And then thank you. So let me now stop sharing, and I'm going to now put some contact information or whatever in the chat so that you can follow up if you want. And then I will defer to Geraldine to see if she has any other questions that have come up.
Just looking through the questions now, but first, thank you so much.
Sure.
Is this process conducted by local SBDC?
No. The WBDC, which we are an SBDC too, we get funding from the state for that. But we do the certification because we're the regional partner for WBENC in this region. So now I will say this, if you are working with Build Bronzeville or whoever, right, and another SBDC, they can help you with questions about, like, I don't know what bylaws are, help me with bylaws, right? I mean, they can help you with all of those things. And so they can really help you kind of work through the list of documents. And I'm going to put a link in the chat. Well, I just did it. This one that, well, the first link I put in the chat is the WBDC scheduling is me. That's my scheduling link. So just set up a time. I find Zoom to be best, but whatever works for you. We're in office downtown 3 days a week, whatever. So just schedule something. I would ask that you schedule it at a time when you can pay attention. I do have people who, I mean, because we're going to be talking about a bunch of technical stuff. And if you are driving your kids carpool, not super helpful. And I don't want to have the same conversation with you 3 times just because you couldn't focus. So sorry to be rude like that. I will have the conversation with you as many times as you want, as many times as you need, because it is complicated, but it will work better if you're able to pay attention. Then this next one, the programs and services link here, that says certification, that gets you to the certification page. And there are 3 resources on that certification under the want to avoid a denial section that I would call out to you. The first is a 7-minute video that you've all just heard, because it's me talking about what are the requirements, the 3 buckets of requirements, right? But if you want to listen to it again, it's right there. Second is just a PDF that's kind of pro tips that kind of says the same information, just in a different format. And then the third is a infographic. That's a 10-step infographic. It has all of the links that you're going to need. It has the link to where does WBENC have the list of documents, so you know that in advance. It has the link to the WBENC link system that you can use to apply for the certification. So super helpful resources there. Then I want to talk about the WBDC a little bit more generally, just to make sure you all know what we are here to help you with in addition to this certification. As I mentioned, we've been around for 39 years. We serve all of the small business owners, not just women. And we have a lot of programs and services. Thanks, Stephanie. Now you're making me hungry for chicken nuggets. It's lunchtime for me. So anyway, but we have a government contracting service called the Apex Accelerator. The Apex works very closely with different units of government, including the city. We can help coach you through getting certified by the city or the county or the state if you have questions on that process. But also, just as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, from time to time, the city or various purchasing groups will do some kind of outreach event, come meet the buyers for whatever. And we can invite you to those programs through the Apex. We also have an access to capital team, which helps with both advising and education around helping you learn more about your financial statements, but then also we do make small loans. We're a micro lender with the city and some other funders. And then we also refer people to banks and other financial institutions for loans that are beyond what we're able to do. Then the last little link that I put in here that ends with archived webinars. We've got a ton of resources on our website at this link that they're basically YouTube videos. Last fall, we did a 10-session program with the IRS that they led. They have these, it's called their Small Business Tax Education Program or whatever. They're really in the weeds, right? So that's both good and bad with the IRS. Super helpful if it's stuff that you need to learn. If it's not a topic you're interested in, you'll probably watch 4 minutes of it and say, I don't really care. But they're labeled so you can see what the different topics are, and you don't have to watch all of them. They're all separate. So, but we also have webinars on how to do a capability statement, which is kind of a one-pager that a lot of times is used when you're working either with government buyers or with corporate buyers. That kind of, it's almost like a resume for your business in a way. Just tons and tons and tons of webinars. They're all, like I said, they're YouTube videos. You can just click on them and watch them. Some of them are 15 or 20 minutes. Some of them are more like an hour, but really encourage people to take advantage of that because they're great resources. So, yeah, so that is that.
A few more
That
questions
is
have
all I
come
have to
in.
say. Great. Excellent.
Um, do you have to own the product such as a reseller?
Very good question. The answer is it depends. Generally speaking, the answer is yes. So if I am selling office equipment or whatever, office furniture, at the very least, and this is where the city's a little bit different. So the city wants me to have kind of a warehouse where I got some product, that I own. With WeBank, as long as I am taking financial risk in the transaction, then it's okay. So for instance, I sell you a bunch of office furniture and you buy it from me. So you pay me, and then I have to order the office furniture from the office furniture manufacturer. And I pay them. So that would be, from a WeBank perspective, that would be okay. If I'm just the order taker, and I'm sort of almost like a quote unquote broker, that's not okay. If I don't have, if you are paying the manufacturer directly, as the customer, then that would not work out. Some of that also depends on industry. In some industries, that is kind of the way business is done, in which case it might be okay. That's one of those gray area things with a lot of depends.
Okay, next question. Can work for LLC where owner cannot be employee in addition to FT employee or
Yeah.
WOSB company?
Yeah, that's completely fine. Yeah, often in an LLC, your tax person would not want you to be a W-2 employee, and that's fine. It's fine for the WOSB as well. I mean, when we say employee in that context, you just need to be working full-time in the business, however that is structured.
Okay, can blank app be printed to use in preparing docs responses?
Not really. I mean, you might be able to do screenshots, but um, I guess you could go in and do screenshots. But the reason that WeBank has this page of documents that are required, which again, you can access through our certification page by going into the how to apply for certification infographic. The reason they have that list is so that you can see it in advance. Which I will now then also say that list is exhaustive. It is also exhausting to look at. And so there's going to be things in there that you might not need. Like it's going to say, trusts. And you'll say, but I don't have any trust. Do I need to go make a trust? How do I make a trust? And you go, no, 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 no. If my name, Karen Goldner, is the name on the stock certificate, I don't have it in a trust. I think we're going to end in about 5 minutes, Lauren. And oh, somebody actually AI just put up a whole list. So the, where was I? Oh, the documents. But if there are documents that really seem like this doesn't make any sense at all, I don't have one of these. Generally speaking, you're not going to need it. The fact that you might not want to give us your tax returns isn't the same thing. And I will say that any corporation in Illinois needs to have bylaws. That's just a state law requirement. And any LLC that has more than one owner needs to have an operating agreement. Because otherwise we don't understand what is the relationship between the owners.
Okay, great. Next question. Is there a resource available that I can reference to help me decide if certification is right for my business?
Yes, that is the scheduling link for me. Because it really is, I mean, there's so many nuances. We've tried to figure out, can we make some sort of, infographic thing with arrows and stuff? And it's just, set up an appointment with me in 20 minutes, we'll have it figured out.
Great. Last question. They just have a question about renewing annually. Do they need your help or is it something that they can do on their own?
Oh, absolutely can do it on their own. I'm glad that topic came up though, because sometimes people feel like, oh my gosh, I need to hire somebody to do this. I would say generally that is not true. And in fact, that sometimes causes complexities and it certainly causes costs that are unnecessary, in my general opinion. I'm here to help. Our services are at no charge. Frankly, one of the great things about the WBDC, even compared to some of the other regional partners, is that because we have such generous support from the city and from other governments and also from the private sector and the corporate sector, I'm here to help. And so just set up a time. I'll answer your questions. I can almost completely promise you that by the end of 45 minutes or an hour, you will feel much more in control of the process. And that's true for the renewals too. I mean, if you need help getting recertified, happy to do that. But it is a lot simpler. So most people don't need help, but if you happen to, for whatever reason, or you have questions, I'm around.
There's one last question about fees. I know you went over it a little bit, but if you could just
Sure,
touch on that
absolutely.
one last time.
So up to $1 million in revenue, and again, this is top line revenue based on last year's revenue, is $350 a year. If your revenue is between $1 million and $5 million, then it is $500. If it's $5 million to $10 million, then it's $750, and it kind of goes up from there. The largest revenue category starts at 50 million or more, and then that's $1,250. And then Ida asked about mentors. I'm not sure that I understand that exactly. I just set up an appointment. That's usually the best thing to do, and we can talk about what you're looking for.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank Karen. Thank you so much for all this great information and taking the time out of your busy schedule to help all these great entrepreneurs. And I want to thank everyone for attending this great webinar and hope everyone has a dry and fun weekend.
That's right.
Right.
That's
Everyone
right.
take care. Have a good one.
Take care, everybody. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.